The fluorescent lights of Riverside Community Clinic flickered overhead as Jessica Carter checked her watch for the third time in 10 minutes. 7 hours remained in her shift, and her body already felt like it was held together by sheer willpower and cheap coffee. She pushed a strand of honey-blonde hair behind her ear and forced a smile for the elderly woman sitting across from her.
I'm Mrs. Rodriguez.
I need you to take these medications exactly as prescribed, Jessica said gently. Organizing the pill bottles on the counter, the blue ones in the morning, the white ones at night. Can you remember that? The woman's weathered face creased with gratitude. You're such a sweet girl, working so hard. Do you ever rest? Jessica's smile flickered. If only Mrs. Rodriguez knew the truth. Between nursing school, 2 part-time jobs, and taking care of her 15-year-old brother Tommy after their parents died, rest was a luxury she couldn't afford. But she wouldn't burden this kind woman with her problems. I rest plenty, she lied smoothly. Now let's schedule your follow-up appointment. The clinic was unusually busy for a Wednesday evening. The waiting room overflowed with patients who couldn't afford private health care. And Jessica moved between them like a dancer in a familiar routine. Take vitals, offer comfort, assist Dr. Martinez with examinations, restock supplies, repeat. Her nursing school training made her invaluable here, even though she was still 6 months from graduation. Jessica, we need you in exam room 3, called Maria the receptionist. Dr. Martinez has his hands full. Jessica nodded and hurried down the narrow hallway, her worn sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. She'd been on her feet since 6 that morning, first at her breakfast shift at the diner, then straight to her afternoon classes, and now here until midnight. Tomorrow would be the same. And the day after that, she entered exam room 3 to find a young mother trying to soothe a crying toddler. Hi there, Jessica said warmly, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. I'm Jessica. What seems to be the problem? As she examined the child, checking for fever and inflammation, she heard unusual commotion in the hallway. Raised voices. Maria sounding flustered. Then Dr. Martinez speaking in the overly polite tone he reserved for important visitors. This is highly irregular, but of course, you're welcome to observe our facility. Jessica glanced up just as the exam room door opened wider. Dr. Martinez stood there. Looking nervous, and beside him was a man who seemed to suck all the air from the cramped space. He was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than Jessica's entire year of tuition. But it was his eyes that struck her, steel gray and sharp, taking in every detail of the small exam room with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously visible and exposed.
Ow.
This is Jessica Carter. One of our nursing students, Dr. Martinez said quickly. Jessica, this is Dr. Adrian Blackwell. He owns Blackwell Memorial Hospital. Jessica's heart skipped. Everyone in the medical field knew that name. Blackwell Memorial was the most prestigious hospital in the state. Its gleaming tower of glass and innovation where the best doctors practiced cutting-edge medicine. And this man owned it. Pleasure to meet you, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. She turned back to the toddler, determined not to be intimidated. His throat is inflamed, but no fever. Probably viral. I'd recommend plenty of fluids and rest. If it's not better in 48 hours, come back. She was aware of Adrian watching her as she worked, explaining everything to the worried mother in terms she could understand, demonstrating how to administer the liquid medicine, even writing down the instructions in Spanish. When she realized the woman was more comfortable reading in her native language, when the family left, Dr. Martinez was called away to another emergency. Leaving Jessica alone with Adrian Blackwell, the silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the busy clinic. How long have you been on your feet? Adrian asked suddenly. Jessica blinked, surprised by the question. I'm fine, that wasn't what I asked. She met his gaze, seeing something there beyond clinical assessment. Concern? Perhaps? Since 6 this morning? It's nearly 9 at night? 15 hours. Welcome to community healthcare, she said with a tired smile. We do what needs to be done. And nursing school on top of this. Someone has to pay for it. The words came out sharper than intended. Not all of us have family money or hospital empires. Instead of taking offense, Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. No, some of us have to build our empires from nothing. Before Jessica could respond, A wave of dizziness crashed over her. The room tilted sideways. She reached for the exam table, but her hand found only air. The last thing she registered was strong arms catching her before everything went black. Jessica woke to softness. Ridiculous, expensive softness that felt nothing like her lumpy secondhand mattress at home. Her eyes fluttered open to find herself lying on a leather sofa in an office that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a glittering cityscape. Minimalist furniture. Abstract art that probably cost 6 figures. "Where am I?" she whispered. "The hospital is in the same building." She turned her head to find Adrian Blackwell sitting in an armchair nearby, his jacket removed, his sleeves rolled up. He held a glass of water, which he offered to her. "You collapsed," he said simply. "I brought you here instead of the emergency room. You're severely dehydrated and exhausted, but otherwise fine. When did you last eat?" Jessica tried to remember. "I had half a granola bar at lunch. That was 9 hours ago. I had a full breakfast." Define full? Coffee and toast. Adrian's jaw tightened. He stood and walked to what appeared to be a kitchen area, returning with a plate containing a sandwich, fruit, and cheese. "Eat all of it. I should go. My brother is expecting me." "Your brother is 15, according to Dr. Martinez. You already texted him from your phone while you were unconscious." "I made sure of it." Jessica sat up slowly, accepting the plate because arguing seemed futile and the food smelled incredible. "You went through my phone?" "I unlocked it with your fingerprint and sent one message so your family wouldn't worry. Would you prefer I hadn't?" She took a bite of the sandwich, and her body nearly wept with relief. "No, thank you." Adrian returned to his chair, watching her eat with that same intense focus he'd shown at the clinic. "Tell me about your situation. Why do you care? Humor me." Perhaps it was the exhaustion, or the way he'd carried her here instead of leaving her to hospital bureaucracy. But Jessica found herself talking. About her parents dying in a car accident 2 years ago. About becoming Tommy's guardian when she was barely an adult herself. About working multiple jobs while finishing her nursing degree because the life insurance money was running out and she refused to let her brother grow up in foster care. "I'm 6 months from graduation," she finished. 6 months from being able to work full-time as an RN and give Tommy a stable home. "I just have to hold on until then." "You're killing yourself," Adrian said quietly. "I'm surviving. There's a difference between surviving and living." Jessica met his eyes, seeing something there that surprised her. Understanding. As if he knew exactly what it meant to push yourself beyond all reasonable limits for something that mattered. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. "You could have just had someone drive me home." Adrian was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Because when I watched you work tonight, I saw something rare. Genuine compassion, combined with clinical competence. You treated that mother and child with the same care you'd give to millionaires. Even though you were dead on your feet, it's just basic human decency. You'd be surprised how rare it is. Especially in medicine." He leaned forward. "I want to offer you a position at Blackwell Memorial. Full-time nursing position upon your graduation with full tuition coverage for your remaining semester." "What?" "You heard me?" "I don't understand." "Why would you do this?" "Because I built Blackwell Memorial to provide the best possible care, and that requires the best possible staff. You have potential, Jessica Carter. Raw potential that's being wasted in that underfunded clinic. Dr. Martinez is a good man doing important work. I didn't say he wasn't, but imagine what you could do with proper resources. State-of-the-art equipment. Access to specialists. The ability to focus on medicine instead of wondering how you'll pay next month's rent was everything Jessica had dreamed of. Too good to be true? There had to be a catch. "What do you want in return?" she asked carefully. Adrian's expression shifted, something almost like respect crossing his features. "Smart question. Nothing beyond excellent work. No strings, no obligations, beyond your professional duties. You'd start as a regular staff nurse, and advance based on merit." Jessica's hands trembled slightly as she set down the empty plate. This man, this stranger, was offering her a lifeline when she'd been drowning for so long. It terrified her how much she wanted to say yes. "I need to think about it," she whispered. "Of course. But Jessica." Adrian stood, moving to his desk and withdrawing a business card. Don't think too long. Your body is sending you clear signals that something has to change. He handed her the card and their fingers brushed. The contact lasted barely a second, but Jessica felt it like electricity. When she looked up at him, she found his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Let me call you a car," he said, his voice slightly rougher. "And tomorrow, take the day off. Rest. Consider my offer. I can't afford to miss work. I've already spoken with Dr. Martinez. Consider it paid leave." Courtesy of Blackwell Memorial's community outreach program, Jessica wanted to argue, to maintain her independence, but her body betrayed her with a massive yawn. Adrian's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you home." As they rode the elevator down to the ground floor, Jessica studied him covertly. This powerful, wealthy man who'd literally caught her when she fell. There was something wounded beneath his polished exterior, something that recognized the wounds in her. The car he'd arranged was a sleek, black sedan with a driver who treated her like royalty. As they pulled away from the building, Jessica looked back to see Adrian standing in the illuminated entrance, hands in his pockets. Watching until the car turned the corner, she clutched his business card in her hand, feeling as if her entire life had just shifted on its axis. Tomorrow, she would think clearly and make a rational decision. Tonight, she would simply marvel at the strange turn her terrible day had taken, because something told her that meeting Adrian Blackwell was going to change everything. Jessica stood in the lobby of Blackwell Memorial Hospital, feeling like she'd stepped into a different universe. Everything gleamed with understated luxury. The marble floors reflected the morning sunlight streaming through massive windows. Well-dressed staff members moved with purposeful efficiency. Even the air smelled expensive. It's like lavender and possibility. She'd said yes to Adrian's offer 3 days after their first meeting. The decision had terrified her, but the alternative was watching herself slowly break apart from exhaustion. Now, wearing the crisp navy scrubs provided by the hospital, she felt both excited and completely out of her depth. Jessica Carter. A woman approached with a welcoming smile. "I'm Linda Chen, head of nursing. Dr. Blackwell asked me to show you around personally." The tour was overwhelming. The cardiac wing alone had more advanced equipment than the entire community clinic. The staff break rooms had comfortable furniture, gourmet coffee, even massage chairs. Jessica kept waiting for someone to tell her this was a mistake, that girls like her didn't belong in places like this. "You'll be starting on the general medicine floor," Linda explained as they rode the elevator. "It's a good place to learn our systems before specializing. Dr. Blackwell specifically requested we place you somewhere you could develop your skills." "He's been very generous," Jessica said carefully. Linda's expression turned knowing. "He's particular about his staff. When Adrian Blackwell takes an interest in someone's career, it usually means he sees something exceptional." Before Jessica could respond, the elevator doors opened to reveal chaos. Alarms were blaring. Staff rushed past with a crash cart. A woman's voice called urgently for a doctor. Jessica's training kicked in instantly. She moved toward the commotion, Linda following close behind. They entered a patient room where a man in his 60s was seizing violently while his wife screamed. 2 nurses struggled to keep him from falling off the bed, but they clearly didn't have control of the situation. His medication history. "Now," Jessica commanded, moving to the bedside without thinking. One of the nurses looked startled by her authority, but quickly rattled off the information. Jessica processed it rapidly, recognizing the signs of a dangerous drug interaction. "We need lorazepam, 2 milligrams immediately. And get his primary physician here stat." "Who authorized you to give orders?" one of the nurses demanded. "I did," said a deep voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. Adrian stood there, still in a suit from whatever meeting he'd been in, but his focus was entirely on Jessica. "Do what she says." Now, the staff jumped into action. Jessica worked smoothly, helping to administer the medication and monitor the patient's vitals. Within 3 minutes, the seizure had stopped. Within 5, the man was stable and resting, his terrified wife clutching Jessica's hand and sobbing her thanks. When the immediate crisis passed, Jessica stepped into the hallway and found Adrian waiting. He leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, and something in his expression made her heart race. "Impressive," he said quietly. Most new nurses would have frozen or deferred to seniority. But the patient needed help. Hierarchy seemed less important than his life. That's exactly why I hired you. Adrian pushed off the wall and came closer. But you should know that not everyone will appreciate your initiative. Some of the staff will resent that I brought you here. I can handle resentment. I've dealt with worse. I'm sure you have. His gray eyes studied her with that intensity she was beginning to recognize. But if anyone gives you trouble, I want to know about it. I don't need protection. I didn't say you did. But you have it anyway. The words hung between them, meaning more than they should. Jessica felt heat rise to her cheeks under his gaze. There was something happening here, something beyond a professional relationship. And it both thrilled and terrified her. I should get back to orientation, she said. Needing distance to clear her head? Of course. I'll see you around, Jessica. The way he said her name, like he was tasting it, made her shiver. She watched him walk away, his confident stride carrying him toward the executive elevators, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of learning and adjustment. Jessica threw herself into her work, determined to prove she deserved her position. She arrived early, stayed late, and studied the hospital's protocols until she could recite them in her sleep. Slowly, the other nurses began to accept her. Recognizing her competence despite their initial skepticism, she saw Adrian occasionally in passing. He'd nod or offer a brief greeting, always professional. But she felt his eyes on her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. Those moments made her pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with career advancement. Then Victoria. Yes. Sinclair returned from London. Jessica first heard about her in the break room, where 2 nurses were gossiping over coffee. Did you hear? Dr. Sinclair is back. Apparently, she cut short her fellowship in London. I wonder if it has anything to do with Adrian. They were together for almost 3 years, and she's still wearing that enormous diamond he gave her. The engagement might not be as over as everyone thought. Jessica told herself she had no right to feel the jealousy that twisted in her stomach. Adrian was her employer, nothing more. Whatever his past relationships were, they had nothing to do with her. She met Victoria that afternoon when the surgeon swept onto the medical floor like royalty inspecting her domain. She was stunning in the way only truly wealthy women could be, with perfect posture, designer clothes under her white coat, and the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers. You must be Jessica, Victoria said, her smile not reaching her ice blue eyes. I've heard so much about you. Adrian's little charity project. The word stung because they targeted Jessica's deepest insecurity. I'm a staff nurse, she replied evenly. Same as anyone else here, of course you are. Victoria's tone made it clear she believed otherwise. I'm sure you earned your position through your exceptional qualifications. Not at all because Adrian has a habit of rescuing damsels in distress. Before Jessica could respond, Victoria glided away, leaving poison in her wake. The other nurses in earshot looked uncomfortable, clearly aware of the power dynamics at play. Jessica forced herself to return to work, refusing to let anyone see how the encounter had shaken her. That evening, she stayed late to finish charting. Most of the staff had gone home and the floor was quiet. She was so focused on her work that she didn't notice she wasn't alone until a voice spoke behind her. She got to you. Jessica jumped, spinning to find Adrian standing in the doorway of the nurse's station. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, and there was something exhausted in his expression that made him seem more human than the polished executive she usually saw. I don't know what you mean, she lied. Adrian moved closer, perching on the edge of the desk. Victoria has a talent for finding people's vulnerabilities and pressing on them. What did she say? Nothing important. Jessica. His voice was gentle but firm. Talk to me, she shouldn't. It wasn't professional, but something about the quiet intimacy of the empty floor made her honest. She called me your charity project. Implied that I didn't earn my place here. Adrian's jaw tightened. Victoria is brilliant at surgery and terrible at accepting when things don't go her way. Our relationship ended because she wanted a partnership of convenience, and I wanted something real. You were engaged, Jessica said quietly. For about 6 months, 3 years ago, I realized before the wedding that marrying her would be the biggest mistake of my life. She disagreed with that assessment. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Jessica watched his profile, seeing tension in every line of his body. "Do you want to know why I really brought you here?" he asked without looking at her. "You said you saw potential." "I do, but that's not the only reason." He turned to face her. "When I carried you out of that clinic, you weighed nothing. You were literally destroying yourself trying to save everyone else. And I recognized something in that because I did the same thing after my sister died." Jessica's breath caught. "I didn't know you had a sister." "Carolyn. She was 12 when she died of leukemia. Preventable, treatable leukemia that killed her because we were poor and the only hospital we could afford provided inadequate care." His voice was rough with old pain. "I built Blackwell Memorial so no other child would die the way she did. I built it as penance for not being able to save her. Adrian, you were just a child yourself. I was 14. Old enough to remember every detail of watching her fade away." He moved closer until only a few feet separated them. "I see that same desperate drive in you, Jessica. That need to save everyone because you couldn't save the people who mattered most." Tears burned in Jessica's eyes because he was right. Every patient she helped was an attempt to make up for not being there when her parents needed her most, for not preventing the accident that took them. "So you brought me here to save me from myself?" she whispered. "I brought you here because you deserved better. Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted. Because when I looked at you, I saw someone worth saving." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "And because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night." The confession hung in the air between them. Jessica knew she should step back, maintain professional boundaries, protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak of wanting something she couldn't have. But instead, she found herself leaning into his touch. "This is complicated," she breathed. "I know. You're my employer. People will talk. Victoria will make my life hell. All true." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Does any of that change how you feel?" Jessica closed her eyes, overwhelmed by sensations. His touch, his closeness, the warmth radiating from his body. "No," she admitted. "Nothing changes it." When she opened her eyes, she found him watching her with an expression that made her knees weak. Want, yes, but also something deeper. Something that looked like hope. "I should go," she whispered. Though she didn't move. "You should," he agreed, not moving either. They stood frozen in that moment, both knowing they were on the edge of something that would change everything. Finally, Adrian stepped back, and the loss of his proximity felt like cold water. "Tomorrow, there's a board meeting about funding for the community outreach program," he said, his voice carefully professional again. "I'd like you to attend. Your perspective as someone who worked in community healthcare would be valuable. Are you sure that's a good idea?" With Victoria back, and people already talking about favoritism, "I don't care what people say. I care about doing what's right." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Jessica? What Victoria thinks, what anyone thinks, doesn't change the fact that you belong here. You've earned every bit of respect you've received." After he left, Jessica stood alone in the quiet nurse's station, her heart pounding and her mind racing. She touched her cheek where his hand had been, still feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. Everything was about to get much more complicated. But as she gathered her things and headed home, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Because for the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as a burden, not as a charity case, but as someone worth fighting for. And that was worth any complication that came next. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m, giving Victoria plenty of time to make her move. Jessica arrived at the hospital that morning to find several board members touring the medical floor, Victoria at their side like a perfectly polished guide. The surgeon's smile was razor-sharp as she spotted Jessica. "Ah, here's our newest addition," Victoria announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Jessica Carter, the nursing student Adrian, recruited from that struggling community clinic. "Tell me, Jessica, how are you finding the adjustment to private healthcare?" The implication was clear. Jessica was an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their world. Several board members looked her over with barely concealed skepticism. She felt her face flush but kept her voice steady. "The resources here allow for excellent patient care," she replied professionally. "Though community clinics serve a vital function for underserved populations." "How noble," Victoria said sweetly. though I understand you're here on a full scholarship. Adrian does love his pet projects. Before Jessica could respond, a code blue alarm shrieked through the floor. Room 412. Everyone froze for a split second. Then Jessica was running. She burst into the room to find an elderly patient in cardiac arrest, his monitor showing the erratic rhythm of ventricular fibrillation. The crash cart was already there, but the staff seemed overwhelmed. Jessica didn't hesitate. Start compressions. You charge the defibrillator to 200 joules. Someone get me his chart now, she worked, with controlled intensity, running the code with precision. Compressions, medications, defibrillation. The board members had gathered in the doorway, watching with wide eyes as this young nurse commanded the room. Even Victoria stood silent, her expression unreadable. Clear, Jessica called, and the patient's body jerked with the electrical shock. The monitor showed nothing for a horrible moment, then beeped with a normal sinus rhythm. We've got him back, one of the other nurses breathed. Jessica continued directing care, ensuring the patient was stabilized before finally stepping back. Her scrubs were rumpled, and her hair had escaped its ponytail, but her hands were steady as she updated the chart. That was extraordinary, one of the board members said from the doorway. How long have you been a nurse here? 3 weeks, Jessica replied, not looking up from her charting. 3 weeks, the man repeated, then turned to his colleagues. And she just ran that code better than some doctors I've seen? Victoria's perfect facade cracked slightly. Beginner's luck, she said dismissively. Though I suppose desperation breeds a certain recklessness. That wasn't reckless, said another voice. Adrian appeared in the doorway, and the authority in his presence made everyone straighten slightly. That was excellent emergency medicine. Jessica saved that man's life. His eyes met hers across the room, and the pride she saw there made her chest tighten. But Victoria wasn't finished. Speaking of lives, Victoria said smoothly, turning to the board members, perhaps we should discuss exactly how much the hospital has invested in Miss Carter's education and employment. I've been reviewing the financials for the board meeting, and the numbers are quite revealing. Adrian's expression went cold. We can discuss that in the appropriate venue. Why wait? I'm sure everyone is curious about how much hospital resources have been directed toward one individual. Victoria pulled out a folder. Full tuition for nursing school. A salary above the standard rate for new nurses. An expedited processing that bypassed our usual hiring protocols. Implications hung heavy in the air. Favoritism. Inappropriate use of hospital funds. The board members exchanged meaningful glances, and Jessica felt sick.
Dr. Sinclair.
Adrian said, his voice dangerously quiet. My office, now. Actually, I think this concerns everyone, Victoria countered. The board has a right to know if personal feelings are influencing executive decisions. Victoria, don't, Adrian warned. But she'd already committed to her attack. Is it true that you've been spending personal time with Miss Carter? That you brought her to your private residence after your first meeting? Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. Jessica wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Every insecurity she'd ever felt came flooding back. She was the poor girl who'd slept her way into a job. She was the charity case who'd taken advantage of a wealthy man's kindness. She was everything Victoria's cruel smile suggested. Stop, Jessica said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Everyone turned to look at her. Dr. Sinclair is right. I don't belong here. Jessica, no, Adrian started, but she kept talking. I came from nothing. I have half the education of everyone else on this floor. Dr. Blackwell did give me opportunities I didn't earn through traditional channels. She met Victoria's triumphant gaze steadily, but he didn't do it because of personal feelings. He did it because he recognized that talent and potential exist everywhere, not just in people who can afford prestigious schools. She turned to the board members. I've worked every day of my life since I was 16. I put myself through school while raising my younger brother. I know what it's like to choose between eating and buying textbooks. And yes, Dr. Blackwell gave me a chance that changed my life. But I've proven every single day that I deserve to be here. The room was silent. Jessica looked at Adrian, seeing something fierce and proud in his expression that made her brave enough to continue. As for personal feelings, she said quietly, I won't apologize for caring about someone who saw me as more than my circumstances. But if my presence here creates problems for this hospital, Or for Dr. Blackwell? Then I'll resign. Effective immediately. No, Adrian said firmly. You're not resigning. Adrian, I don't want to damage what you've built. We crossed the room to stand beside her, his presence solid and unwavering. You could never damage it. You embody everything I built it for. He turned to address the board and Victoria. I make no apologies for how Jessica came to work here. I saw someone exceptional, and I refuse to let bureaucracy and tradition prevent me from bringing her onto this team. If you have a problem with that, take it up with me, not her. The board will have questions, one of the members said carefully, and they can ask them at the meeting. But this witch hunt ends now. Adrian's voice was steel. Dr. Sinclair, your fellowship in London is still available if you find working here uncomfortable. Miss Carter stays. Victoria's face went white with fury. For a moment, Jessica thought she might continue the attack. But then the surgeon gathered her dignity and swept from the room. The board members followed more slowly, murmuring among themselves. When they were finally alone, Adrian turned to Jessica. Are you all right? I just made a spectacle of myself in front of the board. You defended yourself with grace and strength. I've never been more impressed. Jessica laughed shakily. I basically announced to everyone that we have feelings for each other. That's going to make things complicated. It was already complicated, Adrian said softly. At least now it's honest. Before she could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. The overhead system crackled to life. All staff, we have a mass casualty event. Multiple vehicle collision on the highway. All hands on deck. Adrian and Jessica locked eyes. Whatever personal drama they were navigating would have to wait. Right now, people needed them. The next 6 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Ambulances arrived in waves, bringing victims with injuries ranging from minor to critical. Jessica worked alongside doctors and experienced nurses, her training and instincts combining to help her navigate the crisis. She held hands with frightened patients, assisted in emergency procedures, and somehow found time to comfort a little girl who'd lost her mother in the crash. Through it all, she was aware of Adrian working tirelessly in the emergency department. He'd shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, moving between patients with the focused intensity of someone who lived for these moments. Once, their eyes met across the crowded space, and the connection between them felt like an anchor in the storm. When the last patient was stabilized, and the crisis finally ended, Jessica found herself sitting on the floor in an empty hallway, too exhausted to make it to a chair. Her scrubs were stained with blood. Her body ached, and she was pretty sure she'd been awake for 20 hours straight. Adrian found her there. He slid down the wall to sit beside her, and they sat in silence for a long moment, their shoulders touching. You were amazing, he said finally. So were you. That surgery on the teenage boy? I've never seen anything like it. He's going to make it. Thanks in part to your quick thinking in the field triage. They sat quietly, both too tired for anything but honesty. Victoria left, Adrian said. She took a position in Boston. Apparently, she decided working here was no longer in her best interests. I'm sorry, I'm not. She was brilliant, but she was also cruel. The hospital will be better without that energy. He turned to look at her. What about you? Are you staying? Jessica met his gaze. That depends on what? On whether you can handle being with someone who's going to challenge you, someone who didn't come from your world and probably never will fit perfectly into it. Someone who's going to bring all her baggage and complications and stubbornness. Adrian smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Jessica, I don't want someone who fits perfectly. I want someone real. I want you exactly as you are. This is going to be messy, she warned. I expect nothing less. He reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. But I'm willing to be messy if you are. Jessica squeezed his hand, feeling something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the rightness of being with someone who saw her completely and chose her anyway. Okay, she whispered. Let's be messy together. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she met him halfway. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, tasting of coffee and exhaustion and promise. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Come on, Adrian said, standing and pulling her to her feet. Let me take you home. I can get myself home. I know you can. But let me do it anyway. So she did. 6 months later, Jessica walked across the stage at her nursing school graduation. She'd finished top of her class, earned multiple honors, and had already accepted a permanent position at Blackwell Memorial in the cardiac unit. Tommy sat in the front row, beaming with pride, and beside him sat Adrian, looking at her like she hung the moon. The wedding was small, held in the hospital chapel that Adrian had built in his sister Caroline's memory. Jessica wore a simple dress and carried wildflowers. Tommy walked her down the aisle while Linda Chin and the other nurses dabbed at their eyes. "I, Adrian Blackwell, take you, Jessica Carter," Adrian said, his voice steady and sure. "To be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things. I promise to see you, to challenge you, to stand beside you in mess and beauty both. Jessica Carter, take you, Adrian Blackwell," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "To be my husband, my partner, my home. I promise to let you see me, to challenge you right back, and to remind you every day that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other again and again." When they kissed as husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in applause. But Jessica barely heard it. She was too busy looking at the man who'd caught her when she fell and taught her that being caught didn't make her weak. It made her human. 2 years later, Jessica was the head nurse of the cardiac unit, respected and admired throughout the hospital. Tommy was thriving in college on a full scholarship, and every night, Jessica came home to a husband who still looked at her like she was the most extraordinary thing he'd ever seen. They'd bought a house together, something neither too large nor too small, and filled it with warmth and life. On the mantel sat 2 photos, one of Caroline Blackwell, forever 12, smiling from a time before illness took her, and one of Jessica's parents, frozen in a moment of happiness before the accident. "Do you think they'd be proud?" Jessica asked one evening, standing before the photos while Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I think they already are," he murmured against her hair. "I think they're watching all of this and marveling at the incredible woman you've become." Jessica leaned back into his embrace, feeling grateful for every difficult moment that had led her here. The exhaustion, the struggle, the near collapse in a community clinic that had changed everything because it had brought her Adrian. It had brought her home. And it had taught her that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with perfection, but with someone seeing you at your most broken and choosing to help you heal. She turned in his arms and kissed him softly. "Thank you for catching me. Thank you for letting me," he replied. "And for catching me right back." And in the quiet of their home, surrounded by memories of those they'd lost and dreams of the future they were building, Jessica and Adrian held each other close. 2 people from different worlds who'd found their way to each other through pain and healing, through challenge and growth, through the simple revolutionary act of choosing love even when it was complicated, especially when it was complicated, because the best love stories they'd learned weren't the ones that were easy. They were the ones worth fighting for. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.